the last couple of episodes, I provided a backstory as to how I acquired the car. I also ran through all the modifications and overall setup. But now, finally, after more than 2 years in the making since acquiring the FD, the time has come to see what it's made of on the racetrack. I chose Luddenham Raceway to conduct the shakedown, for it being a tighter, low-speed track, with the only real concern being the barrier on turn 1. The first session commenced with the need to not only get a feel for the car, but also my driving rhythm and sharpness. It had been years since my last track day in the MX-5. So I commenced with caution and got heat into the drivetrain, brakes and tyres. All was well until I almost learnt the hard way that my tyre pressures were slightly too high. So that didn't look too serious, but had I not reacted that quickly, the car would have definitely been in the wall. I took a quick break, made some adjustments, and went back out for the second session. So as I slowly increased my pace, to my surprise, the car wasn't overheating. The OEM radiator system kept water temperature below 95 degrees Celsius, even after repeated laps at wide open throttle. It was at this time when I started getting comfortable with the car and commenced pushing a little harder, albeit I had concern with some of the clunking noises I was hearing around corners coming from the rear of the car. The rear suspension bushings are in need of replacement. Whilst a little worrying, it wasn't a huge cause of concern. The car felt stable, so I kept on going. At this point, I laid out consistent hot laps, and this next lap was the quickest at a 55 flat, only 0.2 quicker than my naturally aspirated MX-5. Which goes to show that power isn't everything, but rather having total balance. So in terms of my initial thoughts, the first thing that came to my mind was good. Otherwise, the FD is super capable. Much like the MX-5, it has that chuckable feel when entering corners. However, this car requires a smoother input and finesse in corner placement. You can't be an absolute hoon or careless. Contrary to popular belief, the sequential twin turbos are perfect in terms of how they function. The response in lower speed corners and power delivery at top end on the straights are sublime. It just wants to keep pulling. With that said, all isn't perfect, and I've summarised some of the key issues which will need to be addressed. The first being an oil breathing issue. I actually called it a day once the second session finished, as I noticed substantial loss of engine oil by way of blow-by. The simple explanation is this: when the motor reaches high temps, with heat comes expansion and pressurization. These, coupled with hard cornering and pulling higher Gs, cause the oil to slosh around, and at some point exit through both the engine and via my intake system, leaving an oily mess under the bonnet. Number 2, all, if not most, of the rear suspension bushings need to be replaced. And 3. It may be hard to see, but in most corners, I was actually falling out of my seat. The OE seats are very comfy, but certainly not up to par for track use. So all in all, it wasn't a failure, but not a success either. In saying that, given the very basic setup I had coming into this, my expectation wasn't set too high. After all, the primary objective was to determine where the car stands, with the aim of returning armed and ready. So the next step is to address the said issues, and hopefully improve the car within a reasonable time frame. Till then, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one.